Hi everyone, welcome to another Zen Again video.
In this video we're going to describe our refit in Thailand in 2013 and our passage back to our home in Perth, Western Australia via Malaysia and Indonesia. We hope you enjoy the video. So here's our track from when we bought the boat through to sailing her to Darwin, up through Southeast Asia to Thailand where we had a refit and back to Perth. While in Langkawi at the end of 2012, the unexplained leak under our mast worsened. It needed fixing before we could consider cruising oceans. So at the start of 2013 we decided to move the boat to Precision Boatyards in Phuket, Thailand to look into and fix the problem once and for all. It was a good opportunity to give the boat a thorough refit. On lift out we could see the damage on the hull keel join around the area where we knew we had a problem. We took all the gear off the boat, the mast came off, and Precision started work on stripping the hull as part of a osmosis treatment. The keel came off to provide access to the damaged area, which was immediately around the front of the keel. Inside the boat you could see the damaged area, you can see keel bolts there and the damage to the bottom of the main bulkhead which had remained hidden. Outside they stripped the hull and the original damage was very obvious. They reglassed everything. At the leading edge of the keel and also the trailing edge of the keel was reinforced, as was the skeg. Inside the egg crate structure was reinforced, and they continued work stripping the hull to fix the osmosis. The mast was entirely stripped and repainted, as was the rudder. On deck in the cockpit the old teat came off, and ultimately we ended up with a dry hull after the hull had been stripped. About half the hull came off, and once it was dry the keel could be reattached and the root heavily reinforced. On deck the anchor windlass came out and we dropped the rudder because that had been shown to be leaking, so they completely refurbished the rudder, rebuilding it, tidying up the stainless ribs and welding. So we ended up basically with a new rudder on the skeleton of the old. The mast was completely stripped back along with spreaders, etc., and then repainted. We had a new gooseneck fitting made. Here they're priming or epoxying the underwater hull, and now they're getting into the topsides painting. The paint job was amazing. Precision did a fantastic job. Fittings going back on deck, which was also repainted. Copper coat anti-foul. Looking really good. In the saloon we had new windows fitted and surrounds inside, and new cabin sole. New teak in the cockpit going on, and new stainless steel railings, including the goalpost mounting the solar panels. Ready for the mast to go back in. There she goes. Prop speed in the slings, in the water, and off we go to the pen.
So after Zen Again's wonderful refit at Precision Boats, it was time to sail her back to Perth, Western Australia, going via Ribat Marina in Malaysia, Port Dickson, and then Nongsa Point, Bali, and then to Hampton Harbour on the far northwest coast of Western Australia. So this is the first leg of the trip. Mike is single-handing for this part, and he had a very pleasant little sail from Phuket to Rebak, and it lasted about 24 hours.
At Rebak Island Marina, we decided to replace the Yanmar engine, which was 25 years old and suffering increasing maintenance problems. The engine bay was pretty grotty. We just used block and tackle to get the engine out. Here's the new Craftsman CM 3.27 engine, which we use the boom to get on and off, and block and tackle to get into the nice clean engine bay. And there she is. We also installed a flexible coupling on the shaft, a new wet box, and new exhaust hoses through to the lazarette where we had a second wet box, and the engine came with a nice new control panel. The engine's been very reliable ever since.
So Mike sailed to Port Dickson with his father, and then with a friend from Fremantle Sailing Club to Nongsa Point, Indonesia, and then to Bali. Singapore Straits, very, very busy with shipping, like a freeway but for boats, so really important to keep a good lookout. So Zen again checked in to Nongsa Point Marina. Also during the trip they had a bit of an issue with the squall where the gooseneck fitting pulled out from the mast, and that required a jury rig, which held up pretty well for the rest of the trip. So this is then again in Benoa Harbour in Bali. So Mike and I spent a few days doing some R&R in the island with some sailing friends from a New Zealand boat called Kakadu, before we started our final trip back to Western Australia. So this is us leaving Benoa Harbour, going across the Timor Sea, heading for Hampton Harbour on the Pilbara coast in the northwest of Western Australia. You can see it's quite a brisk old easterly there and very pleasant conditions, and we're making very good progress.
Here we are, coming into Hampton Harbour.
So then again clearing into customs at Hampton Harbour, and here we are on our way to Exmouth, also up near Northwest Cape. Again fairly brisk easterly blowing and having a great little sail. Mike's single-handing here again, going from Exmouth to Geraldton, and as we're heading further south the weather is becoming more typical for late autumn, which was what the time of year it was, and it was wet, cold and squally. After we got home to Fremantle, we spent the next 12 months or so cruising around the local area, so we visited places like Rockingham and Rottnest Island.
As our time in Fremantle went by, we did various work. Here we reconditioned the forepeak, added a AIS, a monitor and a Raspberry Pi, and then Iridium Go, all because we expected to be heading off blue water cruising soon. We had a new Dodger made, and we hauled out to replace 2 Seacocks. But the major project was fitting a new fridge and new sink in the galley. So this is the box being prepared. We lined it with foil for insulation purposes and then added 75mm thick insulation, and on top of that went thin fiberglass sheets which were glassed in place, and we ended up with a nice new fridge with the compressor on the other side of the bulkhead, so in the cockpit lockup. We also replaced the galley sink with there were two sinks, now we've got one which is much deeper, and outboard there's a drinks locker which is insulated. And we ended up with a nice new galley. We also had a stainless steel tiller manufactured and a new cruising main, all getting the boat ready to cross oceans, which is what we had been aiming to do for some time but had been diverted into Southeast Asia and back. And we were packing, ready to go. And we'll finish with a clip of Zen again sailing back to Fremantle from Rottnest Island. Thanks to Terry Day for the footage. In our next video, Zen again sails from Fremantle to the UK.
We sailed via the Southern Indian Ocean Islands, South Africa, St Helena, the Caribbean, Bermuda and the Azores.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.